When it comes to Las Vegas, there's a lot that comes to mind. Whether it's going gambling, seeing your favorite music artists at a concert, doing various adult activities, or breaking the bank over a $20 coffee. There is so much to do. Yet out of all of this, there's one thing that likely doesn't come to mind, which is transit, especially as most, if not basically all of the city, is practically dominated by cars. From the giant suburban stroads, freeways, massive parking lots almost the size of the casinos themselves, and even the strip as a whole, Vegas, despite its railroad origins, is a car city through and through. But with that said, it's not completely devoid of transit, as the city does have a somewhat notable bus network, including services on the strip, and also some other services, such as the trams in between some casinos, and also the Vegas Loop, a service that uses Tesla cars underground and is more or less just a subway with extra gimmicky steps, to be honest. However, out of all of these, there is one service that has captured my attention the most, which is the monorail, a concept that on paper sounds like a pretty cool idea, but in practice hasn't really gone exactly to plan. But is it really as bad as some people say it is? And how did it end up in such a questionable, uncertain state? Well, today, that's what we're gonna find out, as we take a ride on the Las Vegas Monorail. So grab your tickets and let's go! Now, before we begin actually riding, we need to quickly go over the history of the monorail, which surprisingly goes all the way back to the 90s, as the service first began as the MGM Grand Bally's Monorail, which, as you can guess by the name, went between the MGM Grand and the Bally's Casino, and interestingly, actually used original monorail trains from Walt Disney World, which is ironic as that system was arguably one of the few examples of a successful working monorail system, at least here in the US. And I say that's ironic as the Vegas Monorail, as it would later be known, was far less of a success story, because despite an extension to the Sahara Casino in the northern part of the strip, the monorail would struggle financially, changing hands multiple times, and actually go bankrupt on 2 separate occasions. And because of this, it would eventually find itself under the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, who of course owns the Las Vegas Convention Center, one of the biggest draws in the city and destinations on the monorail. Also, because of the Convention Authority's relationship to the state, the monorail also technically counts as a public service, just like pretty much almost all other transit in the country. However, outside of large conventions or events, it seems like the monorail hasn't exactly gotten the success it needs to keep afloat. And regarding why, I think it comes down to a couple factors, which became obvious as I rode the line. Starting off, for a transit service, the ticket prices are actually pretty steep, with, as of writing this, $6 for a one-way trip, $15 for a day pass, and other day pass offerings such as 3 days for $32 or an entire week for $62. And as you can see, yes, they do offer discounts buying tickets online, but admittedly it's only a small amount. And yeah, all things considered, this is mainly meant to cater to tourists, and something like an Uber would probably be at least 15 to 20, but when you consider that most other transit services are usually way cheaper, the monorail is already at an uphill battle. And this is especially the case when you consider that Las Vegas also has the Deuce bus service, which is not only notably cheaper, but also runs directly down the strip and into downtown, and apart from the traffic, is generally a more convenient service outside the convention center. Also, not to mention that, unlike some costlier transit services such as San Francisco's BART, the monorail doesn't charge based on distance, but rather just has a flat ticket price. Which means that if you're only going 1 or 2 stops, you're honestly not really going to get your money's worth. But with all that out of the way, I got my day pass regardless, scanned it through the gate, and waited for a train heading up north. At the time I was filming this, it was admittedly kinda late at night, like about 10 to 11 PM on a weekday, so naturally I wasn't expecting it to be crowded. But still, for a city that's seemingly always active, I couldn't help but feel that the monorail was still pretty empty, with only a couple people at most at any given stop. However, in spite of this, the monorail still came pretty quickly, as the service does have departures around every 6 minutes, which honestly is actually pretty good by American transit standards. and in general, despite the high cost, my experience was decent enough. The stations were very clean, and the automated trains did their jobs perfectly fine, having surprisingly quick turnarounds, arrivals, and departures. And on the inside, the trains are admittedly a bit small, but still have more than a few seats, which were nothing too spectacular, but perfectly good enough for a short ride. If anything, my only complaint would be that the trains can get quite bumpy at some points, but it wasn't anything worse than you'd see at something like Disney World or Disneyland. The overall trip from end to end was about 14 minutes, with brief stops at multiple strip casinos and of course, the convention center, where the line diverts further east from the strip to access. However, outside of the convention center, the line itself is located in a somewhat weird area, which takes me to the second major problem this service has. With the whole line actually being about a block east of Las Vegas Boulevard, it mainly travels above a lot of alleyways and side roads on the back of the casinos. And because of this, some of the views aren't quite as great as you'd expect, although you can still get some neat ones, and also a lot of the stations can be somewhat inconvenient to access, as a lot of them require you to walk through the entire casino to access the strip, which can be confusing and take a while given their massive size. So as a result, the whole service is honestly kind of out of the way, and really only serves one side of the Vegas Strip, leaving out a lot of potential destinations. Also on top of that, while plans have been discussed in the past, the monorail does not serve the Las Vegas airport, which could have provided a huge boost in usage and ridership, but has strongly been opposed by taxi groups and owners, who have a strong presence in the city and feared the monorail extension could result in lost business. However, because of all this, the monorail, while seemingly a fun concept and perfect for a flashy city such as Vegas, never really got the chance to blossom to its full potential, and didn't really become a game-changing success like some hoped, with it instead basically being this side project that costed a lot and was just never taken super seriously. I mean, it would have been actually pretty cool if they had it go down the actual strip and access places like the airport or even downtown, but because of its weird location and being in a place hesitant to fund big transit projects, it seems like the monorail will continue to exist in this lacking state with limited use. And overall, as much as I enjoy its existence, I can't say I'm too confident about its future, because while no confirmation of it closing have been made, the service is only getting older and older, with parts reportedly being harder to find, and much of its infrastructure needing replacement in the future. Also, it didn't help that in a news report, their chief financial officer basically said that once the monorail was done, they could convert it into tracks for the Teslas on the Vegas loop? Which I have no idea how that would even work, but to me at least, that kinda shows that while they hope to keep running it, the idea of it inevitably closing or becoming something else is not out of the question, which still does not bode well for the monorail's future. And with this, combined with its odd location, financial troubles, hesitation for expansion, and other services such as the Deuce already existing, the monorail is kind of a niche service, but one with the budget of a massive transit project, and while having some purpose, will only continue to decline in its current state, with the only possibilities being to bet more on its future, or possibly fold. But with that said, those were my thoughts on the Las Vegas Monorail, both in writing it and my thoughts on its possibly uncertain future. But overall, I'd like to hear your thoughts about it, and if you have any experiences writing it. However, until next time, my name's Hideaki, and I'll be signing out. Goodbye, everyone.
Please hold a handrail firmly at all times. Next stop northbound is Horseshoe and Paris Las Vegas Station. Our next stop is the closest station to the Bellagio, and it's